Travel, hidden designs in statecraft, mysteries and decode issues that...
Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India News, India's voice to the world. I'm Lipakshi Kurana, coming up in the next hour. Voting underway in Sri Lanka's parliamentary elections. 17 million voters to elect representatives for 225 seats, 8,800 candidates in fray. Joe Biden meets U.S. President-elect Donald Trump at White House. Trump picks Tulsi Gabbard and as Director of National Intelligence. Marco Rubio proposed as Secretary of State. Campaigning for assembly elections in India's Maharashtra and Jharkhand in full swing. Leaders of various political parties holding multiple rallies. PM Modi to address rallies in Maharashtra today. And in sports, Paris authorities ramp up security ahead of the France versus Israel Nations League clash on Thursday. And on to the top story this hour. Voting for the parliamentary elections in Sri Lanka is underway at over 1,400 polling stations across the island. Voting commenced at 7 a.m. and will go on till 4 p.m. local time. Over 17 million voters will choose from 8,800 candidates vying for 225 parliamentary seats in a proportional representation system. Sri Lankans will casting their ballots in a snap parliamentary election today, months after electing a Marxist-leaning president in the Indian island nation's first elections since the 2022 economic meltdown and political crisis. We may tell you that the election was called by President Anurakumara Dissanayake, who won the September election after blaming the country's traditional wing, the ruling elite, for the economic collapse that led to the country defaulting on its loans. And for more, we have Dr. Ahmed Moyun Farooqi joining us. Well, Dr. Farooqi, as the polling has started, how is the polling going on and how significant is the voter turnout for today's election?
Lepakshi, very good morning to all of our viewers across the world. Yes, Sri Lanka is now witnessing another election in the span of just about 2 months. We had presidential elections in September, and today we're having the parliamentary elections across the island. You talked about the interest with regard to all the voters in Sri Lanka. Yes, people are thronging to the polling stations across the island, and I'm right now just outside one of the polling centers here in Colombo, where even the Prime Minister, Dr. Harini Amarasuriya, is shortly going to visit here for casting her vote. People have been thronging to the polling centers since 7 a.m. in the morning. However, it has been informed that there is a possibility of some weather related issues in certain parts of the island, which is why people are anticipating that some amount of voters might turn up a little earlier than the usual. That's one. However, secondly, at the same time, it has to also be remembered that traditionally parliamentary elections witness lesser turnout as compared to the presidential election. We had seen a turnout of around 78 to 80% in presidential elections this time. People are anticipating that about 5 to 6% of fall would be expected in these elections as well. That said, it needs to be seen till later today by around 4 p.m. How many people would actually come out, and we will keep updating all our viewers with regard to how the polling progresses in the entire island. Lepakshi.
All right. Dr. Farooqi, also one of the most significant elections, of course. Tell us the significance of these elections and how they could affect the Dissanyake's political vision for the country.
You see, Prof, you're absolutely right. These are elections which will have a lasting impact with regard to how the government of Anurakumara Dissanayake will go ahead over the next 5 years. He would require a parliamentary majority to to push forward with his reforms that he had promised during the campaign, both at the time of presidential elections as well as during these current parliamentary elections. That said, it is very important for NPP to not just muster a simple parliamentary majority, but also they would be looking forward to get a special majority of 2/3 to bring in constitutional reforms. That's something which people have been talking about, analysts have been talking about, while at the same time, we also have to remember that this will also be a make or break kind of a moment for certain opposition parties. We also remember that political landscape in Sri Lanka has changed over the last few years. From 2015 to 2019, Sri Lanka Freedom Party was in power as in the form of President Maithripala Sirisena's government. Now today, we do not see the Sri Lanka Freedom Party in the among the front runners in most of these elections that we have seen this year. That said, in addition to that, I also have to mention United National Party that also is on the sidelines. At the same time, Sri Lanka Potujara Peramuna, which was the ruling party in 2019 elections, was brought down to about 3% of the vote in the presidential elections held this year. So we need to see how SJB and the New Democratic Front would pose a challenge to the ruling NPP in this election. Vipakshi.
All right, Dr. Farooqi, also with Sri Lanka facing, of course, ongoing economic difficulties, what's next for Sri Lanka's turn to the left?
You see, it's a very, very difficult task with regard to challenging circumstances like the economic crisis. And efforts were made by the previous president, Ranil Wickremesinghe, and his government to put the economy back on the course of recovery. Along with that, we also have to remember that the IMF deal was struck in 2023, and thereafter, Sri Lanka has had certain austerity measures which were applied, all to the public discomfort, and there was considerable, resistance from several sections of the society. Now, the new government will have to traverse through how to go ahead with the reforms while at the same time maintaining a balance between IMF's commitments as well as taking care of how they would take forward the reforms as they had promised by reducing tax rates as well as reducing the electricity and various other fuel tariffs which they have mentioned. And this is something which people have been looking forward to. And most likely these measures would be discussed and debated once the budget proposals will be presented in the parliament, and for which they require a parliamentary majority in the island. Vipakshi.
All right. Also, Dr. Farooqi, what are the key issues that you think that the voters are going to prioritize today in today's election?
Vipakshi, 2 years back, Sri Lanka had witnessed the peak of economic crisis when there were serpentine queues before petrol stations, before grocery markets, and various other places, and Sri Lanka had come to a grinding halt. From there to now, the inflation has come down considerably. I mean, it was 70% at the peak of the economic crisis. Today, the inflation is in minus terms, and that's, it talks about how much efforts were made by Sri Lanka to come back to normalcy. In fact, such similar steps would have been taken in other countries, and we have seen certain examples where countries have taken about 5 to 10 years to come back to normalcy. However, Sri Lanka has done so in 2 years span. Now, if we talk about the important, the discussion topics which had been during the campaign as well as the run-up to the election, that had been one of the most important agenda points for all political parties as well as the people, as well as the voters. So the recovery from the economic crisis, which even now currently it exists. In fact, if we have to talk about the economic crisis, the external debt still exists, and the repayment of that would start only from 2029 onwards. So Sri Lanka is not yet completely out of the woods. It's still on the knife's edge, and it continues to remain so. And this is where the new government, whichever will get the majority in the parliament this time around, will also have to plan with regard to how Sri Lanka would come out of the economic situation. And this is something which people had been very, very vocal with regard to talking about. And that has been the central idea with regard to how Sri Lanka needs to plan for the coming 5 years' time. Vipakshi.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Farooqi, for all those details. And we'll keep taking an update from you throughout the day.
Sure.
Moving on, U.S. President-elect Donald Trump made a triumphant return to the White House on Wednesday, where outgoing President Joe Biden offered a show of civility to the bitter rival who denied him the same courtesy 4 years ago. Trump's visit came as Republicans were declared the majority party in the House of Representatives to give him complete control of the Congress. The U.S. President and President-elect shook hands in front of a roaring fire in the Oval Office, with Biden restoring a tradition that Trump broke when he refused to recognize his 2020 defeat by Biden. Upon Trump's return, Biden congratulated the 78-year-old Trump and pledged a smooth transfer of power, while Trump also emphasized on the smooth transition of power.
Well, Mr. President-elect and former President, thank you, Donald, congratulations.
Thank you.
And looking forward to having a, like we said, smooth transition. Do everything we can to make sure you're accommodated, what you need. And we're going to get a chance to talk about some of that today. So
good.
Welcome
Thank
back.
you very much. And thank you very much. And politics is tough, and it's in many cases not a very nice world, but it is a nice world today, and I appreciate it very much. A transition that's so smooth, it'll be as smooth as it can get, and I very much appreciate that, Joe.
You're welcome.
Well, as U.S. President-elect Donald Trump prepares to take office for a second term, he's announced a series of high-ranking administration positions. Let's take a quick look at the early picks. Trump announced that Susie Wiles, one of his two campaign managers, will be his White House Chief of Staff. Tom Homan, the former Director of Immigration and Customs Enforcement during Trump's first administration, will lead border security efforts. Republican Congresswoman Eli Stefanik, and staunch Trump supporter, would be his ambassador to the United Nations. Former Congressman Lee Zeldin will oversee the Environmental Protection Agency, aligning with Trump's energy policy reforms. Zeldin, a staunch Trump ally, served in Congress from 2015 to 2023. Fox News host Pete Hegseth, a veteran of the Army National Guard, has been appointed Secretary of Defense. Congressman and former Army Green Beret Mike Waltz will advise Trump on national security issues with a particular focus on China. Well, Trump named tech billionaire Elon Musk and entrepreneur Vivek Ramaswamy, a former Republican presidential candidate, to lead a newly created Department of Government Efficiency, while South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem, known for her strong stances during the COVID-19 pandemic, will head the Department of Homeland Security. John Ratcliffe, former Director of National Intelligence under Trump, has been named the CIA Director. U.S. Senator Marco Rubio is expected to become Secretary of State. The senator has in past years advocated for a muscular foreign policy with respect to U.S. geopolitical foes, including China, Iran and Cuba. Trump has Matt Gaetz, a U.S. representative, to be his nominee for Attorney General, and Tulsi Gabbard, a former Democratic representative and critic of the Biden administration, will be Director of National Intelligence. Meanwhile, U.S. Senate Republicans elected John Thune on Wednesday to lead the chamber next year, opting for a well-regarded insider and shrugging off a public pressure campaign by supporters of Donald Trump to pick a loyalist to the president-elect. The South Dakota senator's victory is a sign the Senate could retain some degree of independence from Trump next year, when Republicans will control the White House and possibly both chambers of the Congress. Republicans will hold at least 52 seats in the 100-seat Senate and are on track to retain a thin majority in the House of Representatives, where several races have yet to be decided. At a news conference, Thune said he would aim to confirm Trump's nominees quickly and work to help him cut spending and bolster border security.
We have a mandate from the American people. A mandate not only to clean up the mess left by the Biden-Harris-Schumer agenda, but also to deliver on President Trump's priorities. We will make sure that the President and his team have the tools and the support that they need to enforce border security laws and to remove the violent criminals who are wreaking havoc in every one of our states.
Well, the Republicans were declared the majority party in the U.S. House of Representatives on Wednesday, completing a clean sweep of Congress and the White House in last week's elections and handling incoming President Donald Trump's vast legislative power. After more than a week of the counting of votes, the channels CNN and NBC projected that Trump's party reached the 218 seats needed to retain their majority in the 435-seat lower chamber, having already seized the Senate from the Democrats. Having control of both chambers of Congress clears the way for Trump to confirm his nomination for key administration positions. After the vote, U.S. Congressmen from South Carolina, Joe Wilson and others recited the Pledge of Allegiance and congratulated the House Speaker on the majority.
Congratulations to Speaker Mike Johnson for his achievements of the passage of critical legislation in the House and his leadership in maintaining the Republican majority.
Well, U.S. President Joe Biden and Chinese President Xi Jinping are set to meet on Saturday on the sidelines of the APEC summit in Lima, Peru, for what may be their last encounter before a potentially tougher U.S.-China relationship under Donald Trump. U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan announced that discussions will address rising tensions from Taiwan and the South China Sea to China's role in stemming fentanyl ingredient flows. Biden also plans to confront Xi on China's suspected involvement in hacking U.S. officials' communications, as well as China's support for Russia's actions in Ukraine and North Korea's troops' presence in Russia. This marks their first interaction since an April phone call aimed at easing bilateral stains.
Part of what President Biden will communicate is that we need to maintain stability, clarity, predictability through this transition between the United States and China. And he will also really reinforce the point that in order for us to manage this competition responsibly going forward, we have to sustain over the long term the channels of communication at every level, particularly the military-to-military level.
Well, the U.S. Ambassador to Mexico, Ken Salazar, criticized Mexico's security situation, calling it unsafe and highlighting flaws in the previous administration's approach. Salazar condemned former President López Obrador's hugs, not bullets strategy, which sought to address root causes of violence, but according to Salazar, did not work. He expressed hope that newly inaugurated President Claudia Sheinbaum would tackle crime more effectively, urging increased security investment.
The reality is that at this moment, Mexico is not safe. So how are things going to work with the United States government to ensure that we reach a point where there is a safety on both sides of the border, and that includes fentanyl, arms trafficking, the crimes, and human trafficking. The hugs, not bullet strategy, did not work.
And still to come on DD India News Hour. Amid evacuation warnings, Israel launches fresh strikes on Beirut's southern suburbs. After election rout, Mauritius opposition leader Ramagoolam sworn in as Prime Minister. And the highly prized and mysterious 18th century diamond-laden necklace fetches $4.8 million in Geneva auction.
Our habitats are turning into concrete jungles, and that is concerning, but there is hope even in this grim reality.
Our rivers are like lifelines. They are spaces for humans, for biodiversity, and yes, we have neglected them so far, but really that's an opportunity for us to restore them to their natural conditions.
We now have species that can adapt by conserving the water they have instead of letting it evaporate and being easy to care for.
We have always been farmers in my family. We used to do chemical farming with hybrid seed varieties, but now we have switched to organic farming with natural seeds.
This embankment will be removed and the river will be widened to cover the grassland up to the wider flood embankments on both the Swiss and Austrian side.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India News. I'm Lipakshi Khurana, and moving on, Israeli forces have launched fresh strikes across southern and central Lebanon again, carrying out at least 4 airstrikes. The Israel Defense Forces said on Wednesday it hit facilities used by Hezbollah for military purposes in the capital's suburbs while issuing new evacuation warnings for Lebanese civilians living in specific areas of southern Beirut. Lebanon's health ministry said that 6 people were killed and at least 15 others injured in an Israeli attack on Eremoun, a village in central Lebanon. The exchange of fire came as right-leaning members of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's cabinet expressed support for President-elect Donald Trump's latest fix for his incoming administration. And Israel's defense minister said in video released on Wednesday he would not agree to any Lebanon ceasefire that does not ensure a disarmed Hezbollah withdraws north of Lebanon's Litani River. Katz, who became defense minister last week, made the comments during his first visit to the Northern Command. His comments come as Lebanon waited to hear Washington's latest ceasefire proposals after a U.S. official expressed hope a truce could be reached.
We will not make any ceasefires, and we will not stop and will not take out foot off the pedal, and we will not allow any arrangement that does not include achieving the goals of the war, which is disarming Hezbollah, withdrawing it from beyond the Litani River, and mainly creating the true conditions for the residents of the north to return to their homes safely.
Meanwhile, Hezbollah said it launched a drone attack targeting Israel's military headquarters and Ministry of Defense in the city of Tel Aviv on Wednesday. In a statement, the Lebanese militant group said it conducted an aerial attack with a squadron of exploding drones on the site housing Israel's main defense institutions. In 2 statements on Wednesday, the military said it had intercepted 2 drones and 40 projectiles launched from Lebanon in attacks that caused no injuries. Hezbollah and Israel have been at conflict since late September, when the Israeli military escalated its airstrikes on Lebanon and sent ground troops across the border. And updates now from the Russia-Ukraine conflict as Ukrainian forces repelled a major Russian attack near Kupiansk in northeastern Ukraine on Wednesday. Ukraine's General Staff reported Russian forces launched 4 waves of attacks using 15 armored vehicles, including tanks, but Ukrainian defenders skillfully destroyed them and eliminated many personnel. Heavy fighting also erupted in Pokrovsk, where Ukraine repelled 35 of 36 Russian assaults. Meanwhile, President Zelensky reported intense Russian activity in Donetsk, with regional prosecutors confirming a Russian attack killed 2 civilians west of Donetsk city. And Mauritian politician Naveen Ramagoolam was sworn in as Prime Minister for his 4th term on Wednesday, a decade after he last left power. Ramagoolam took the oath of office during a brief ceremony at State House, the official residence of President Prithviraj Singh Rupan, in front of a selection of lawmakers, foreign diplomats and top civil servants. His alliance, the Changement coalition, won a landslide 60 of the 62 National Assembly seats, with 62.6% of votes in Sunday's ballots. Afterwards, Ramagoolam, who previously served as Prime Minister from 1995 to 2000 and 2005 to 2014, said that the country had voted with rage and that he intended to transform it. A federal appeals court in Argentina upheld a guilty verdict for former President Cristina Fernández de Kirchner on Wednesday. Kirchner, who served 2 terms as president between 2007 and 2015 and was vice president from 2019 to 2023, was found guilty of defrauding the state and given a 6-year prison sentence in December 2022. The case can still be appealed to the Supreme Court. Kirchner faced charges of alleged corruption in the awarding of public works during her presidency. She survived an assassination attempt in 2022, sparking massive demonstrations in support of her. She will assume the position on the 17th of November. And French prosecutors on Wednesday have called for a 5-year prison term and a ban from public office for Marine Le Pen, a prominent far-right leader, accusing her and 24 others of embezzling EU funds. This trial, almost a decade in the making, could derail her ambitions in the 2027 presidential race, where she's seen as a strong contender. Prosecutors are pushing for a provisional execution of the sentence, meaning Le Pen could be barred from running for office even if she appeals. She claims the demands are outrageous, while the European Parliament's lawyer sees the request as consistent. The case involving misused European Parliament funds runs until 27th of November. And voters in Somaliland have gone to polls on Wednesday to choose a president in a key election that was delayed for 2 years. Ballot counting was underway on Wednesday, but results are not expected until next week. President Muse Bihi Abdi, in power since 2017, is standing for re-election against the main opposition party's candidate, Abdirahman Siro. His rivals also support the cause. Abdirahman Mohammad Abdullahi of the main opposition Wadani party campaigned on a platform of democratic reforms and social cohesion, while Faisal Ali Warebe of Justice and Welfare Party advocated for a national unity government. The vote was originally scheduled for 2022, but lawmakers opted to extend Bihi's term by 2 years. And authorities in Borat, Sudan have authorized the delivery of UN humanitarian aid via the key border crossing of Adre for 3 more months. Sudan's Sovereign Council said on Wednesday it would extend the use of Adre border crossing, which are seen as essential by aid agencies for the delivery of food and other supplies to areas. Adre, which was closed by an order from the army-controlled government in February, was reopened for 3 months in August until November 15th, and it had not been clear whether that period would be extended. The United Nations welcomed the decision to keep Adre open for another 3 months.
We very much welcome the Sudanese authorities' decisions to extend the opening of the Adre crossing from Chad, for the United Nations to continue delivering humanitarian assistance to people in need in Sudan for an additional 3 months. Adre is a critical lifeline for millions of people, but alone it is not sufficient. As needs continue to spiral in Darfur and across Sudan, it is more important than ever that all necessary routes, including those crossing borders and those crossing conflict lines inside Sudan, are available for the rapid and efficient movement of humanitarian supplies and personnel into areas of greatest needs.
The Brazil Supreme Court was evacuated after 2 nearby explosions left 1 dead in a square near Presidential Palace shortly before the country hosts the G20 summit. The blast comes 5 days before global leaders from the group of 20 major economies meet in Rio de Janeiro, followed by a state visit to Brasilia by Chinese President Xi Jinping. The first explosion came on Wednesday in a parking lot near the court building. The Supreme Court justices had just ended a plenary session and were quickly evacuated safely. Federal police said they had deployed a bomb squad to investigate the blast. A police officer said the dead man found in the square had an explosive device on him, so his body would be carefully inspected in case of another explosion. The country's Solicitor General on social media described the explosions an attack. President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva had left the Executive Palace on Wednesday night, shortly before the explosions. At the COP presidency's troika, which includes the United Arab Emirates, COP28, Azerbaijan, COP29, and Brazil, COP30, met in Baku on Wednesday within the framework of COP29 to assess the roadmap to mission 1.5 degrees centigrade. The troika discussed the progress made in implementing the outcome of the global stocktake and the remaining gaps in developing and implementing ambitious climate policies in the upcoming rounds of nationally determined contributions. Wednesday's meeting reinforced the cohesion among the COP presidencies and set clear priorities and strategic actions required for 2025, building on the outcomes and outputs of COP28, implementing the results of COP29, and paving the way for COP30. The troika reflects the commitment of the 3 presidencies of COP28, hosted by the UAE last year. COP29, currently hosted by Azerbaijan, and COP30 to be held in Brazil next year. to submit their NDC aligned with the 1.5 degrees Celsius goal and guided by the provisions of the historic UAE agreement by early 2025. Now let's take a look at other stories making news around the world. Thousands of illegal miners are stranded in a disused gold mine in Stilfontein, South Africa, enduring extreme conditions with no access to food or water. The miners, many of whom had been working in hazardous weather, are now facing major circumstances. Last week, in an effort to curb illegal mining activities, police rounded up 834 clandestine miners who had resurfaced after security forces cut off their food and water supplies. And a diamond-studded necklace thought to be linked to a scandal that hastened the downfall of doomed 18th century Queen of France, Marie Antoinette, sold at auction in Geneva for $4.81 million. The Georgian-era piece containing 300 carats of diamonds fetched more than expected after a bidding battle. And still to come on DD India News Hour. Over 66% of voter turnout recorded in first phase of assembly elections in India's Jharkhand. Indian government urges media to join Phase 3 FME auction for 730 channels promoting local content. And we'll show you glimpses of the annual Pushkar Fair in Ajmer, one of the most vibrant and culturally rich festivals in India.
Complex issues, hidden agendas, twists and turns, strategic games. We think all dots are linked. We just need to connect them. Join me every week as I connect the dots to unravel hidden designs in statecraft, mysteries, and decode issues that matter to you. Watch Connecting the Dots with me at these times on DD India.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India News. I'm Lepakshi Khurana, and moving on. Voting is underway in Sri Lanka's parliamentary elections. 17 million voters to elect representatives for 225 seats, 8,800 candidates in fray. Joe Biden meets U.S. President-elect Donald Trump at White House. Trump picks Tulsi Gabbard as Director of National Intelligence. Marco Rubio proposed as Secretary of State. Campaigning for assembly elections in India's Maharashtra and Jharkhand in full swing. Leaders of various political parties holding multiple rallies. PM Modi to address rallies in Maharashtra today. And in sports, Paris authorities ramp up security ahead of the France versus Israel Nations League clash on Thursday. Well, Prime Minister Narendra Modi will be embarking on a three-nation visit on Saturday. Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri, while briefing media, said that PM Modi's visit to Brazil is for the 19th G20 summit to be held on November 18th and 19th.
Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi will be embarking on a three-nation visit on Saturday, the 16th of November. He'll go to Nigeria, to Brazil, and to Guyana. The visit to Brazil is for the 19th G20 summit that's being held on the 18th and 19th of November. This is the Prime Minister's third official visit to Brazil. This particular G20 summit is also going to be a very special summit because it will be the first time that the African Union will take its place in the G20 grouping as a member. You would all recall that it was at the New Delhi summit last year that the African Union was inducted as a full member of the G20.
Well, India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi is in Brazil's Rio de Janeiro on the 18th and 19th of November to take part in the 2024 G20 summit. India is the founding member of the grouping of the world's 20 largest economies and was instrumental as last year's host in getting the African Union, comprising 55 nations, full membership during last year's summit in New Delhi. DD India's Gautam Roy has put together this report to show what's in store this year in Rio.
Leaders of the world's 20 largest economies, along with the African Union, will be in Brazil's Rio de Janeiro for the 2024 G20 summit. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi will also be participating in it as the leader of the world's fastest growing economy.
The visit to Brazil is for the 19th G20 summit that's being held on the 18th and 19th of November. This is the Prime Minister's third official visit to Brazil. This particular G20 summit is also going to be a very special summit because it will be the first time that the African Union will take its place in the G20 grouping.
India's G20 Sherpa Amitabh Kant has told DD India that the PM will be playing a constructive role in taking New Delhi's G20 agenda from last year as host forward. He will also help Brazil pursue its objectives of eliminating hunger and poverty, sustainable development and reform of global governance institutions forward, with emphasis on global economic growth and sustainable development.
The Prime Minister will focus on a range of issues concerning the global South, and the challenges relate to driving growth, balanced, sustainable, inclusive growth. And the challenge is that the global growth is slowest at the turn of the century.
Let's understand what is G20. This will be the 19th summit of the G20 leaders, a grouping which came together after the 1999 Asian financial crisis. Finance ministers and heads of central banks of member countries met in the following years. In 2007, when the global financial crisis hit, the grouping was elevated to the level of heads of state and government. The first G20 summit took place in 2008 in Washington, D.C. G20 statements and decisions are non-binding upon members and follow a consensual approach. Over the years, the G20 has gone beyond financial matters to also deliberate and act to achieve sustainable development goals and further the cause of global peace. Last year, despite tremendous challenges, the New Delhi Declaration was brought on the first day of the summit with consensus on the Ukraine conflict. This year, while this conflict remains unresolved, the West Asian conflict has come up as another formidable challenge.
This will be a complex issue. There will be many more challenges. We struggled with it. We did about 300 hours of negotiation on one para of Russia-Ukraine. We failed 16 times but arrived at a consensus on the Russia-Ukraine war. Where even the United Nations has not been able to arrive at a consensus so far.
The upcoming change of guard at the White House could also become a factor during the deliberations due to President-elect Donald Trump's MAGA agenda, which is centered on high tariffs and climate change denial. Despite the challenges, the grouping has been moving forward, taking incremental steps to resolve differences and take collective action in multiple spheres through the years. It is hoped that even this year, progress will be made in Rio to benefit the earth and humanity. Gautam Roy, DD India.
And moving on, polling concluded peacefully for the first phase of assembly elections in the Indian state of Jharkhand on Wednesday. Over 66% of voting was recorded till 5 p.m. The highest, over 77% voting, was recorded from Kharsavan. 43 constituencies spread across 15 districts went to the polls in this phase. Electoral officers claims the voting percentage is likely to increase as reports from remote areas are yet to come. The second phase of polling will be on the 20th of November. The counting of votes to take place on the 23rd of this month. And meanwhile, campaigning is in full swing for assembly elections in Maharashtra and Jharkhand, with senior leaders of various political parties holding multiple rallies and roadshows in the two states to garner support for their candidates. Prime Minister and senior BJP leader Narendra Modi is set to intensify BJP's campaign in high-stakes Maharashtra by addressing public rallies in Sambhaji, Nagaram, Panvel and Mumbai today. Congress chief Mallikarjun Kharge and leader Rahul Gandhi also to campaign for the party. Maharashtra will vote in a single phase on November 20th, with counting of votes scheduled to take place on the 23rd of November. There are 288 assembly seats in the state. And the government has appealed to the media industry to take part in a big way in the Phase 3 e-auction of private FM channels, which is currently underway. Stating this at the India Game Developers Conference in Hyderabad, Secretary of Ministry of Information and Broadcasting Sanjay Jaju said that the auctioning process of 730 FM channels in 234 small towns will end by January next year, adding there is a need to expand FM radio network in the small towns.
We are also going to be conducting a roadshow for the FM radio private auctions that are going to happen all across the country in small towns with 1 lakh population. And I'm sure many small towns in Telangana which do not have private FM radio will get an opportunity to have hyper-local content coming through their private radio stations from which are going to be run by the industry.
While today marks the World Diabetes Day, diabetes affects 1 in 11 people globally, with numbers expected to rise. Let's take a look.
Diabetes, a silent but deadly disease that affects millions around the world. It is a condition in which the pancreas in body does not produce insulin. Insulin is a hormone that helps body cells absorb glucose and keeps the amount of sugar in blood under control. When someone has diabetes, the production of insulin in the body is reduced or stopped. Diabetes risk factors: family history of diabetes, obesity, lack of physical activity, not exercising, high blood pressure, high levels of cholesterol and triglycerides, smoking, gestational diabetes. With no noticeable symptoms in early stages, it gradually progresses, causing damage to various body parts and leading to a host of complications. Regular checkups are crucial for individuals with diabetes to monitor their condition and prevent further complications. By adopting a healthy lifestyle, the risk of diabetes can be reduced. Increase awareness about diabetes in your home and family and take steps to prevent diabetes. Bureau Report, DD India.
And now let's take a look at other stories making news today. Delhi residents wake up to thick smog and poor air quality as air quality of national capital remained in the very poor category with an air quality index of over 300 in many areas. Authorities urged residents to limit outdoor activities, especially vulnerable groups such as children, the elderly and those with respiratory conditions. Many locals donned masks as a precaution and relied on air purifiers indoors. In a significant advancement for healthcare in the Chenab Valley, Doda has inaugurated its first histopathology laboratory, marking a major milestone in medical infrastructure for the region. Equipped with state-of-the-art technology, this laboratory is set to enhance diagnostic capabilities for patients in Doda. The people of Jabalpur in Madhya Pradesh welcomed the Lord Ram Maha Rath Yatra with a grand and heartfelt ceremony. This significant event dedicated to Lord Ram drew thousands of devotees from Jabalpur, filling the city with an air of devotion, celebrating the values and virtues associated with Lord Ram's life. The annual Pushkar Fair in Ajmer is one of the most vibrant and culturally rich festivals in India. This internationally renowned event celebrates the heritage traditions of Rajasthan, drawing tourists and cultural enthusiasts from all around the globe. The historic Baripada Carnival in Mayurbhanj attracts hundreds of visitors from across Odisha and neighbouring states. Known for its rich display of tribal culture, arts and heritage, the Baripada Mela is a celebration that beautifully blends cultural expression with community spirit. The carnival also features the diverse array of local handicrafts and handlooms from the region, showcasing the talent of Odisha's artisans. And still to come on DD India News Hour. Dollar at 1-year high as Trump trade momentum eclipses Fed easing view. We'll tell you why UK consumer group Which takes on Apple over iCloud service. And in sports, India beats South Africa by 11 runs in the third T20 International, takes 2-1 lead in the four-match series. Welcome back. You're watching DD India News Hour. Lipakshi Khurana, and moving on, weather updates. Colombian President Gustavo Petro estimated more than $300 million will be needed for initial aid to address the emergency caused by heavy rains in the northwest of the country. Torrential rain across Colombia's Pacific coast and Andean regions have displaced more than 90,000 people. The extreme weather has triggered widespread flooding and landslides across the South American country, leading Colombia's first leftist leader to declare a nationwide state of disaster on Sunday. A satellite image captured on Wednesday showed a large column of smoke billowing from Indonesia's Mount Lewotobi Laki-Laki. Several international airlines cancelled flights to and from Indonesia's resort island of Bali after further eruptions spewed ash clouds as high as 10 kilometers and forced thousands to evacuate. The first eruption of Mount Lewotobi Laki-Laki on November 3rd killed at least 9 people. Indonesia has close to 130 active volcanoes and sits on the Pacific Ring of Fire, an area of high seismic activity atop various tectonic plates. Well, residents of Spain's Valencia region prepared for another round of heavy rain and storms just 2 weeks after flash floods left rivers overflowing and caused extensive damage across the area and several other parts of the country. Flood-hit municipalities have cancelled all non-essential activities, advised their residents to work from home, and urged volunteers to pause clean-up efforts while sandbags are sacked for extra protection. With recovery efforts still underway, uncertainty looms over the potential impact of the new storm system. And on to some business news now. The US dollar revisited a one-year high against major peers on Thursday as a fourth straight winning session from momentum sparked by Donald Trump's election victory eclipsed a rise in the bets for Federal Reserve easing. The dollar dipped briefly on Wednesday after a measure of US consumer inflation met economist forecast, keeping the Fed on track to reduce rates at their next meeting in December. But the currency soon recovered and then rallied to new session highs. Cryptocurrency Bitcoins also shot to a fresh record high of $93,480 overnight and was rising back towards level early in Asia's day. Trump has vowed to make the United States the crypto capital of the planet. Higher trade tariffs and tighter immigration under the incoming Trump administration are projected to fuel inflation, potentially slowing the Fed's rate-cutting cycle longer term. Expectations are deeper deficit spending are limp-fitting Treasury yields, providing the dollar with additional support. And the British consumer group Which is launching legal action against Apple, accusing the tech giant of breaking competition law by pushing customers into its iCloud service. Which claims Apple made it hard for users to switch to alternative storage providers, leading them to pay once they exceeded the free 5 GB limit. This lack of compensation allegedly cost consumers up to £13.36. In this year, Apple denies any anti-competitive behavior, insisting iCloud is optional and users have third-party choices. If successful, this case could see 40 million UK Apple users entitled to nearly $3 billion in compensation. Which says this action aims to secure fairer treatment in consumers and promote a competitive digital market. And weak China markets dragged broader Asian shares lower on Thursday, while longer-dated U.S. bond yields rose alongside the dollar as investors assess the monetary policy and inflation outlook in the world's largest economy. That came on the back of a fall in Chinese stocks as they're struggling to make headway. The mainland blue chip index fell 0.16%, while the Shanghai Composite Index lost 0.24%. In line with declines across Asia, Japan's Nikkei already erased early gains to last trade 0.14% lower. And you're watching TT India News Hour. Time now for some sports news. The French police officials have ramped up security ahead of the Nation League match between Israel and France on Thursday. Ahead of the match, protesters took to the streets in Paris on Wednesday, decrying the upcoming soccer match. Some 4,000 police will secure the event, which will be also attended by French President Emmanuel Macron. The authorities have increased security following violent clashes between locals and Israeli soccer fans in Amsterdam last week. Police officers will be deployed at Stade de France and across public transport networks. Well, Israel coach Ran Ben Shimon said that he hoped supporters would still turn out to watch their match against France despite the security concerns.
My national team to the best possible way of playing against a very strong national team of France, the best we can. I hope as much as we can, and I hope also so that people from the Israeli community around here will come to see our national game.
Well, in other Nations League match, England will take on Greece at home on Thursday. Harry Kane and his England teammates hit the training pitch before travelling to Athens. England are second in their group with 9 points, while Greece have won all 4 games so far and are at the top. England's interim boss, Lee Carsley's aim is to help England gain promotion to League A before he returns to managing the under-21 side. Carsley was forced to make wholesale changes to his squad after several key players withdrew due to injury. Trent Alexander-Arnold, Bukayo Saka, Declan Rice, Phil Foden, Jack Grealish, Levi Colwill, Cole Palmer and goalkeeper Aaron Ramsdale are all unavailable for this match or Ireland at Wembley 3 days later. And India defeated South Africa by 11 runs in a nail-biting third T20 international at Centurion on Wednesday. With the win, the visitors took a 2-1 lead in the 4-match series. Getting an invitation to bat first, India posted a mammoth total of 219 for 6 with the help of Tilak Verma's maiden T20 international century. India lost Sanju Samson on the second ball of the innings, but Tilak and Abhishek Sharma stitched a solid 107-run partnership to put India in a commanding position. While rest of the Indian batters failed to fire, Tilak dug in his heels and went on to score his 151 balls. He remained not out on 107 of 56 balls. In reply, the Proteas were restricted to 208 for 7. The last match of the 4-match series will take place on Friday. All right, that's all for this edition of DD India News Hour, but let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. For those on the go, you can get all the latest news and updates from India and across the world on the DD India mobile app. The app is available on both Android and iOS platforms. Scan the QR code on the screen to download now. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Lipakshi Khurana from all of us here in Delhi. Thanks for watching DD India News Hour.